Welcome back to the Movie Wheel Marathon. I'm Andrew.
I'm curious as to what you're doing.
I'm not excited about this one. So yeah, we're on Terminator Salvation, which is the fourth in the Terminator series, directed by, I'm told here, MCG.
MCG.
I guess
Yeah,
that's
his
his
full
name.
name is Joseph McGinty Nickel.
So did we call him MCG or is it McG?
I have no idea.
All right, McG came out May 21st, 2009. I actually remember the trailers for this being on TV. And that's like my one little tidbit real quick before I stop talking. They spoiled the whole movie in the trailer. Like, the big, cool, dramatic shot of the trailer is finding out that Marcus is a Terminator, which that's like the only cool part of this movie. So that was dumb. But anyway, before I get into more of my negative thoughts, I would just like to hear what you think of this as a whole. Yeah, I'm gonna leave it at that. So, hit it, would you?
We're coming in after the third one, obviously. And the third one, we talked about this, didn't really feel like a Terminator movie. And then this one started, and I was like, this doesn't feel like a Terminator movie either. And then I felt like it slowly proved me wrong. And I'll say by the end, because like I started thinking, I'm probably not gonna like this one. This has the extreme style change and grittiness of a sequel that took itself too seriously as a sequel. And yet, by the end of the film, I think I liked it.
Really?
Yeah.
I was not expecting that.
Well, the thing is, like, I realized that, and I was like, Andrew does not.
Oh, you knew I wasn't gonna like it. All right.
I really can't tell you why, but I knew you weren't gonna like it.
Interesting.
And I think my only guess, and I genuinely don't know if this is legitimate for you or not, so tell me if I'm way off.
Go ahead. I want to hear your prediction, your deep dive into my movie watching psyche.
So this film is not a modern day time travel thriller hybrid movie. It's not some people who are fairly normal people are thrown into a sci-fi situation and have to deal with it. This is almost a full-on war movie that happens to take place in the future with sci-fi things. Like, it feels like you're watching a movie about the wars in the Middle East most of the time. And the style complements that. Like, the colors, the filming, the music, even the acting, like even the actor choices, like who they cast as the role. It all plays into that. So much so that if it weren't for the obvious robot parts, it wouldn't really feel like a sci-fi movie, in my opinion.
Okay.
I mean, there is the whole like nuclear wasteland situation in LA, but I don't know. Like, the whole thing feels very military, and that was my only thought as to maybe why I thought you wouldn't like it, because it's just too military.
Gotcha. Okay, so you are right in that I don't like it. In classic Mac fashion, you're giving me way too much credit, because I didn't consider that at all. I don't think that's a bad thing. My issue with it, if I were to now spend a little moment here ranting, I only gave you 4 minutes. I don't want to rant yet. I don't think there's two movies in this movie, and I don't think they really work well together. I think they pull attention from the other too much. The story of Marcus being like the first cyborg Terminator thing, and him kind of having a Captain America-esque story, going under, waking up, the world's a mess, and him kind of figuring it out, and then coming across maybe Kyle Reese and them fighting for a while. I think that's amazing. In watching those moments, I don't give a shit about what John Connor is doing. But because I'm into this franchise now, seeing Christian Bale embody this character who's had like 30 plus years now to be set up as one of the coolest, most dramatic sci-fi heroes who we've never really got to see do anything yet. Like, here it is. This is the moment. I don't give a shit about this other guy who I've never heard of walking around, you know, with his head up his ass, constantly causing issues. Like, I don't care. I want to watch either John Connor saving the world, trying to find Kyle and putting the pieces together, putting the resistance together, or I want to watch Marcus go through his journey, because like the two stories don't mesh. Yeah, they come together in the end because they're supposed to or whatever. And I think there's a version of this where the movie is just Marcus until the beginning of the third act, and that's when John comes into it. It's a big, oh shit, oh my god, holy crap moment. Here it is, it's John Connor. Because otherwise, I don't think you could start with John Connor and have Marcus throughout and have it be interesting. I think there's too much back and forth. There's too much this, that, or the other, and it's not that interesting. For me, I just think both of them are very interesting, but not together. I think if they were gonna do it, it should have been just Marcus, and then John comes in for the finale. And my bigger point, which I'll talk about later, is I think there should have been sequels to this. I think there should have been the past trilogy and the future trilogy ending with sending Kyle back to the 80s, because this could have been this world, this war. This could have been a trilogy, or it's just John. Just John, and you find some other cool way to bring the Terminator into it, and it's just him on the ground, full war movie, doing his thing. Because not only do I don't think these stories really mesh, as it is, it's dumb and sloppy, and in the end, the explanations are weird, and it's weirdly convenient. Like, I'll hold off for now because I want to hear more of your points, but that's why I don't like it. I don't think these two arguably very interesting perspectives together create a muddled mess that I find more frustrating to watch.
Okay, so this is interesting because I agree with most of your critiques, but I don't find them to be as egregious as you seem to find them. We start the film from Marcus's perspective, and they don't even really tell us that it's in the past. You just kind of have to like guess at it.
It says 2003.
Yeah. Oh, does it? Okay,
it
then
does.
I just was looking down, taking notes or something. Never mind then. Apologies.
You're good.
Creators.
Because I wondered about that at first. I wondered how long they were going to experiment on him, because in 2003, that's when the world's supposed to go to shit. So they get him, do whatever they do to him for a while, and then immediately they're done with him.
So yeah, like you see the Cyberdyne papers and everything.
Yes,
so
yes.
he's a part of that company now, or his body will be. And to start with a lethal injection, I was curious to see if the movie was going to continue that theme of the idea of like, because like capital punishment is something that people debate in terms of, is it moral for human beings to render judgment that far, right? And so I wondered if the movie would focus on that, and I wouldn't say that it did. It really was more about the characters' experiences with death more than anything, so maybe that's kind of why. But anyway, I will agree that the fact that we had two protagonists in this film kind of made it weird. Like, following Marcus and following John didn't really balance super well, but I did like the parallels they set up between the two characters, where Marcus is clearly a human who has robotic parts, right? Like the decisions that Marcus makes are consistently emotion based. Like, even in the very beginning when he's like, do whatever you want, man, I'm guilty to what happened to my family. Like, he's not scheming or thinking, he's just feeling. And that's true for all his actions through most of the film. And he comes up with a couple of plans, but mostly it's about like trying to help people or trying to, solve some emotional need that he has. And John, on the other hand, is being asked to be more robotic by his command. They're like, we have to make the, especially at the end with the classic, like, the higher ups don't think that human life is valuable and they're not going to try and save it because of the risks to the attack to take out Skynet. And it's logically a valid choice, but morally not so much. And our hero has to make the choice to save the humans, and that's actually what saves everybody. Very classic.
Of course.
But I thought that worked well in contrast to the fact that Marcus was a machine trying very hard to be human, and John was a human trying very hard not to become a machine. I thought that worked okay in terms of theory. There were definitely times where the story felt very separate because we were following them from early on. I like the idea that you pitched where we're following Marcus through the first, act 1, act 2.
Yeah, and then
And then at the end, John shows up. But they cast Christian Bale.
I
so they're not gonna
know.
do that.
I get that. I feel like it would have. I just feel like that would have worked better to have him be like the cool hero. And again, I think it would have been better if there were 2 more movies with Christian Bale as John Connor. I think it would have paid off in that way.
Sure.
I couldn't help but spend a lot of this movie just thinking about what I would do differently. And I know I shouldn't do that. I'm trying to be better than that because I'm not a director, and I get that. It's just I was thinking of like what just maybe for one things that clearly just aren't working. For one, Marcus, I feel like it would be really cool if with the lethal injection his eyes close and then immediately open. And he's there, and he's in the situation. Because the way they set it up, I don't know what's happening, and we really don't ever get an explanation. And then the explanation we get, I think, is stupid because Connor and his gang of people, they're there in this weird lab, which I guess they got an anonymous tip from that Skynet gave them all of a sudden for no reason now. They don't free anybody. They barely learn anything. They get like a cool little reference to the T-800's on its way, and they don't free any of the people there. Yeah, they all blow up. There's kind of a cool long shot of Connor taking off in a helicopter and flying around, but because everything is gray and covered in smoke, I don't know what's happening. Again. And then they leave, and Marcus crawls out of the hole. And at this point, we don't know... Did they awaken him? Was he in stasis? Like, was he activated? Like, how did he survive what just happened? Like, there's so much what the hell is happening that it's difficult in some ways, I think, to care at the end of the day. And I think if you twisted things a little bit, if you want to go with your idea that we keep Connor, maybe don't have Kyle be in this movie. Again, I'm sticking to this thing that this needs to be a trilogy. And they get to this lab, and he finds Marcus. Connor finds Marcus, and they spend the movie as like buddy cops doing their thing. And Connor has a theory, because Marcus is all confused, that he's actually from the past. And he might be the first example of them trying to like gain info and bring it back, like because he doesn't know. And then maybe you do the same thing with the trip mine, and we find out all of a sudden, no, he's a Terminator. Holy shit, his buddy's a Terminator this whole time. Because... I like the moment between Connor and Marcus when Marcus's face is all screwed up and they're in the river, but I just feel like that is surrounded by the bullshit that is that what's her name character Williams Blair freeing this dude that she spent a long afternoon with, like lady, I understand your sentiment too, but you've now caused the death of all these people that are on your team for this dude who, as far as you know, is very much possibly a bad guy. And then we also find out later on, because of what Skynet says, Blair, was straight up wrong. She was wrong. Right. She was wrong. Like, he was there to kill everybody. Like, I would prefer and think it would have been stronger to have, because like Connor's already doing the math himself. He's saying he sees it in his eyes. He knows it's wrong. He knows that this guy believes he's a dude. And I think it would be better if they had been like friends throughout the movie, and then he lets him go, or he puts the pieces together. I think that would all be stronger if it wasn't after this stupid chase scene and fight that didn't have to happen because of the actions of a character we just met, by the way. Like, we've spent no time with Blair. She comes into it and just does all this stupid shit like right away. Like, I don't know. I feel like there's too many dumb things.
on paper, I agree, but again, this is one of those instances that I did kind of forgive the fact that it had done this, because lots of other movies have done this really dumb thing where girl meets boy or boy meets girl. One of them, oh no, a traitor, and then the other goes, but I believe in them anyway. And it's so common and it's painful most of the time. And it was painful in this one because Blair was being dumb. She was being very dumb. But I liked the moment between her and John, where John relied on her judgment to make his decision. I liked the idea that John would want to find, like, not only would he trust his men, his army, to have good judgment, and then use that judgment for his own decisions. I also like that he went to an outside opinion, and for some reason, I like that it wasn't his significant other. I feel like it's valuable that he looking for diverse opinions, right?
Yeah, I get that. I think that would again be stronger if we spent more time with her. Like,
Agreed.
we probably get more screen time with her technically than Trudy in Avatar. I'm just thinking because it's Sam Worthington, but like Trudy is throughout the movie. Like, she's there in different scenes. She pops up here, there. Like, she has, I think, more of an impact if you wanted her opinion towards the end of the film. Blair comes out of nowhere and then disappears. Like, she's not even a part of like the final confrontation. So like,
Agreed.
I don't know. I get it's like you said, it's a cliche. It's a little bit of a product of its time, probably. I don't necessarily feel that that's an excuse. I feel like by 2009, you technically knew better, and you were taking a lazy route. Things that had been done before that you wanted to do, but better films have been done by now, and you could have done something more interesting.
Yeah, ish.
Ish.
Yes, ish. I think action movies deal in cliches like this because they're effective. And I will say, as someone who prefers to be rational rather than emotional, this particular trope bothers me because the idea that you would have all the evidence to the contrary and yet you would still trust someone and then you would act on that trust rather than what you know drives me crazy. But it is very human. It is so human to do something like that. And that's kind of the whole point of the Terminator films, is the difference between man and machine. And the only reason, like, all evidence for Marcus would be that he's bad because it's true that he is a sleeper agent. He's literally there to rat on them. But it is also true that Marcus does everything he can to prevent that. So literally the only way for him to be vindicated in that situation is for there to be a human connection, which, to be fair, in your theory or your version of the story, you also had that. It was just with John instead of a random woman who shows up halfway through the film. I just don't think that it's crazy annoying that it happened to be a random woman that showed up in the film.
I guess. I find a little bit of conflict between your two analyses, because the approach to this era of Terminator and this film being so grounded, so gritty, more of a war movie versus a sci-fi movie, and kind of taking a great deal of approach to that. We've got body horror, we've got loss of men, we've got, tragedy and grittiness, and everything is gross and gray. But we also have Transformer level cliches, like story elements that are so beneath what you're trying to do in this instance. I feel like that makes it almost worse, because in other ways you're not doing that. I don't think there are that many egregious cliches, but then there's that one, like the whole like human connection thing.
Maybe I'm watching the wrong war movies, but the war movies I watch are filled with cliche.
Oh well, I guess I have not seen that many war movies. Fair enough. I guess I think maybe it depends on the cliche. This immediate trust of this dude after finding out it's the Terminator, knowing the world you live in, knowing the situation, and just being okay with it. Especially also after I don't vibe with her getting all comfy and cozy with him after
Agreed.
being assaulted. Like,
Yeah.
Granted, he
Weird.
saves her, and yeah, I get that, but you could take that so many ways. You could take that as him being possessive of her. You could take that as him seeing her as his already and not wanting to share. Like, you, in this post-apocalyptic, I just watched Furiosa, so I've got apocalyptic grossness in my head.
Okay.
But, like, there's so many ways you could take this, and after that, I just feel like it would be more believable and natural and not weak to feel rattled and not want him near you. But instead, she's flirting. She's like, I'm kind of cold. I just need some body heat. You want to give me a little body heat? I love hearing your heartbeat. Like, lady! Your plane just crashed, you're in a war, and you just got attacked by these crazy gross dudes. You don't know this guy! Come on! What are we teaching our children?
No, I agree. The whole romance angle with her, although admittedly they didn't. There is no, again, right off into the sunset, so that's nice, kind of. It's
I guess, but
a
it's
departure from the cliche. But,
I
you're right.
guess.
No, that this particular moment it's way too close to what almost happened to her. There are people who would go for positive human connection after a scare like that, but I feel like the way that it is framed, the way that the story is told, the sort of tone of the two scenes do not sit well together. It feels very much like she's doing that because the movie wants her to have a thing for him, and it's not. It doesn't vibe right with what just happened.
Yeah.
So
she's also she's a purely, unfortunately, again, the only other woman character of the movie. She's a character of convenience, because we find out later that Marcus's whole thing was to infiltrate. He was supposed to find Kyle, he's supposed to find John, and oh my gosh, he does. But like, he really doesn't. He doesn't find John. He gets to John because Blair finds him and takes him there, and then they introduce this love story that they immediately remove, and then, well, she lets him go, Andrew. Don't forget that. It's like, yeah, but John was gonna let him go anyway. That conversation was going to be had. She serves no other purpose, which is gross, and I don't love that, but it just, again, makes this whole weird thing that they incorporate pointless. And it's just, ugh.
No, you make a good point. I think the charisma of the character and the part she plays in sort of like bringing him to camp is all right, but in terms of like, I don't know, the movie very much wanted her to be the love story in this, and she's not. It feels kind of weird, actually. Yeah. I think I love that they didn't forget to include Kate in this.
Yes.
I also love
that
she's pregnant and she doesn't go into labor in the movie.
Yes, thank you, no cliches. Amazing. Yeah. But she's doing stuff. She's a medical person. She's giving advice. Like, she's doing cool things. Definitely doesn't pass the Bechdel test. They rarely do. But, like, it was cool to see her doing stuff.
The idea that the signal was something that Skynet had trapped them with. I'll be honest, I didn't see that coming. Mostly because I was so focused on how transparent the twist about Marcus being a Terminator was. That I was like, this movie can't surprise me. And then it went, but we set a trap, and I went, oh, yeah, okay. It's like, this is the exact thing that Skynet did before in the previous film, where they released a virus forcing them to use Skynet, and it was actually Skynet the whole time. Like, it's the exact same strategy. I just wasn't paying any attention because I was so focused on Marcus being a Terminator. Yeah,
I do think that was cool, and I think that was a fun excuse to do lots of cool things. Like, they had to keep testing it, so we got to see more examples of the robots we're fighting. We got to see more action out in the field. We got to see lots of interesting stuff. But yeah, with the twist, I don't know. I think as well, you don't see it coming in a good way because you are maybe thinking about Marcus. But I also think the twist is undercut in the end because it doesn't really matter, because they quote unquote win, and we're kind of we're then also overshadowed by the twist that Marcus was a sleeper agent the whole time. Like, we kind of know, or you pick up, or you know something's off about him. You don't know that Skynet has been like running him the whole time since before he even woke up, which I take a bunch of issues with because none of that makes any sense. Because when they're like, yes, you were our sleeper agent and you successfully did what you were supposed to do, did he though? Because the number of times he had Kyle Reese and didn't do shit.
Just didn't kill him?
And then, sure, if you want to argue that he wasn't going to do it, they have Kyle Reese in a cell for like at least an hour. What are you doing? Kill him. You opened this movie saying that somehow Skynet and the Terminators had put it together that he's a big piece of this. Kill him. Just what are you doing?
Yeah.
What are you doing?
We haven't had an opportunity to mention this, so I'm gonna go ahead and just throw it in there. Chekhov.
Yeah,
It's
Chekhov.
Chekhov.
Ugh. R.I.P.
Anton, I don't know how to say your last name. I'm so sorry. I miss you.
Yelchin? Anton Yelchin?
Yes, that's it. Yeah.
He does great. I do like him as little Kyle. I will say that. He was fun.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it's actually very interesting following Kyle around because the one critique I have for the character, other than the fact that Skynet didn't just like identify him while he was in the base and shoot him on sight, the main critique I had is I didn't get the sense from Kyle in the original movie that he's a leader. Like there's no real leadership qualities about him. And then they randomly started when
he was doing leadership
Kyle Reese
stuff.
in this one, he was thrown in like with all the other humans and he was like telling him to calm down. Most important thing we can do is survive. It's like that's not really Kyle Reese's role here. He's much more of the keep your head down, survive kind of guy. He's noble to be sure because he volunteers for this crazy mission, even though, as we talked about before, it might be out of some
No, he doesn't.
weird, twisted love story. But he's still like basically volunteering to die, kind of. Although you could argue he's volunteering to go to a better time, and hopefully his time won't happen. So maybe it is just pure selfishness. Could be wrong. But like that all stands in the sense that he doesn't have any like leadership qualities, right? He's not the guy who's organizing an army. That's John's role. That's John Connor's role. And so I felt like that was kind of weird. They kind of like forced bits of that on him, and then they didn't really do anything with it anyway. So I figured it was kind of like a wash. It didn't really matter. But it was like, why would you do that? Why try that? It didn't make sense to me.
Yeah, I'm torn with a lot of the Kyle stuff because I agree with everything you said, but I do think his performance was good for like what they gave him. And I like that I like the dynamic that they set up where John is anxiously trying to find Kyle and Kyle is just excitedly doing what John tells him to do over the radio. Like, I'm gonna do this thing for John Connor because he's cool, and John is just frantically trying to find. Like, I like that dynamic and that back and forth.
Yeah,
it's
actually for such a weird like situation for those characters to be in. This movie manages to make it like interesting and sympathetic. Like the weirdness comes into play that John is looking for his dad, who he's not met yet. And Kyle is looking for his hero. And they're going to have a mentor-mentee, father-son almost kind of relationship.
It's so weird.
But the son is going to be the father?
Yeah, I don't like thinking about it too much because it's weird. It's really weird.
But they managed to make it, in my opinion, they managed to make it like sympathetic and interesting in this film. Rather than being weirded out by it, I can just see that John is concerned about Kyle, and Kyle just wants to be an important part of the rebellion. So resistance, whatever it is.
I feel so bad for Kyle though. Can you imagine being such a massive piece of a thing, a war, a timeline, and never knowing it? I don't just mean that you're a part of the butterfly effect. You're like one of the main 3 pieces, and you never know. You never know that you're John Connor's dad. Ever. There's never that moment where he finds that out. Ever. Because he dies. He always dies before he knows that Sarah's going to have the kid. He doesn't have a clue. He just
Yeah.
is doing his thing. Which is just wild to me.
It is crazy that Kyle doesn't really know the big picture result of his involvement, right? Um, I think it I don't know. I think the way this film does the character, though, for the most part, is pretty cool. I love that he's introduced with his iconic line from the first one, "Come with me if you want to live." I actually
Yeah.
feel like that was part of the I think that was part of the turning point for me on this film, because the last one, like,
They were
it
sloppy with
looked
those.
yeah, it looked maybe more like a Terminator film in the sense that it was there's a machine from the future come to the present day trying to kill John and his companions, and there's another Terminator, RT 101 is back, right? Like, but this one I felt did a better job exploring the themes of the Terminator franchise, using the world and the characters of the Terminator franchise, using the iconic lines from the Terminator franchise. It felt, even though the style was so different, to me, this felt more like a Terminator movie than the previous one did.
Yeah, I mean, I think I do like this one more than the last one. The two conflicting stories do drive me nuts because I could just see both of them shining if they were allowed to be their own thing. But it is more fun to watch Kyle trying to survive and to watch John leading the army and watching the big robots and the snake robots and the motorcycle robots. Like, oh, that's way more fun than the Terminatrix, easily, just by far. And the acting is better for sure. But there's just I don't know. I so far of the four we've watched, I've really only truly enjoyed one and a half of them. Like, I mean,
Wait,
I like most of one, but like it's not my favorite
okay.
anything. Two though kicks butt. I love two.
Yeah, no, for me right now, it's definitely like Judgment Day, the first one, Terminator. And in this one, it's not far from the first one, in my opinion. It's not on the same level, but it's like maybe two steps down.
Yeah,
And
I'm in
then
the same boat. And three is definitely
the other one
last.
is like
Yeah, all the
it's
way.
probably
Yep.
not going to be my favorite
No.
unless they really mess up the next couple. I don't expect
Well,
that one.
we'll
Oh,
see.
good. Good. Good.
But
Yeah.
yeah, I don't know. I want to talk more about it, but I am stuck on just it's weird how they successfully, that is Skynet, the bad guys, they get their hands on Kyle so many times and they don't do anything. So it's kind of hard to take seriously in the end because you're not even trying to write situations which like he's slipping through their fingers. He's like a little worm that just can't quite get him. He's just so good at evading. John keeps coming at the last second. No, they got his ass. What were you gonna do? You didn't do
Yeah.
anything. Ugh. And then, okay, how do you feel about John, his heart being the multi-murderer Terminator man's heart?
Yeah, we got to talk about that.
I don't love it. I again think my pitch for a trilogy would make that somehow better if we got to spend more time with the guy, and there's like a redemption of some sort, and they were like friends, and then it was kind of cool that John's heart was a Terminator's heart. But in this movie, I just feel like it's why? Like, I mean, it's
Yeah, no, in my opinion, this is easily the worst part of the film. Um, it's it's so forced. It violates a whole bunch of ethical rules, even in the situation that they're in. It doesn't really make that much sense. Like, obviously, people are calling John like this sort of like messiah figure, right? The idea that John Connor is the general that leads humanity to win the war against the machines. That's it's almost like a religion. And so the idea that they would do anything to keep him alive does kind of track. However, killing a person, and let's not debate about that because Marcus is definitely a
I'm
person.
there with you.
Killing a person specifically to donate their human heart, which happens to be like one of the 3 human pieces he has left, and giving it to John, and they don't have a replacement piece for Marcus, that's just straight up not morally right. The point where nobody should perform that sort of operation, even though Marcus is the one that suggests, and Marcus is the one that, like, he's like, yes, let's do it. He's giving his consent. He's suggesting, he's encouraging it. It just doesn't feel right. It feels weird. Um, and the story only has that happen to try and make the coolness of the themes or whatever of, like, now John Connor has a Terminator's heart, but it's actually a human heart, because that was how we knew that Marcus was a person the whole time, is you could hear his heartbeat in the important moments when he had to make decisions. Like it was, the whole movie, they were aligning the idea that because Marcus has a human heart, he will be a human. That was the whole idea for his character arc the whole time. And at the very end, he gives his very human heart to John Connor so John doesn't die. That it just doesn't work. If Marcus was dying and he wanted to give his heart, that would make sense. But he wasn't. He, like, it doesn't make any sense for it doesn't make any sense for the heart to be symbolic of Marcus as an individual, as a human person within his struggle of man versus machine, and then for him to give that up. I mean, as I'm saying it, it kind of sounds like a wonderful sort of, like, maybe to be human is to sacrifice for the people around you, but that's not how it feels. It feels like a horrible violation of the Hippocratic Oath. Like,
yeah. Well, see, Mac, they also introduced the perfect solution in the movie. Because John holds in his hands the Terminator power cores. They blow up a bunch of them. All you have to do is have one of them hold on to one. And then we get to keep both. And Marcus gives up a part of his humanity to save the man who saved him or give him a second chance. But he still lives because he's like, you know what? I don't actually need this piece. I can survive with this. He needs it more than I do. And I'll still be here. I still have this. I'm still me. I still have my soul. Something stupid like that. Like, you introduced the idea to save them both. And you could have done it. And it could have been kind of cool in that case. I would have liked that more.
I think you're right. I think they could have used those power cores. I like your idea. But I think it would have been better if there was just some sort of, like, really advanced med pack that Skynet had access to that they used to give John an artificial heart. I think that would have been way more interesting, because
just full on Captain Picard it.
Yes, because Marcus's heart is so crucial to his character. I just finished a rant about it, but I mean, even in the final scene, the reason Marcus can come back from the dead is because you can like perform CPR on him, essentially, and you can shock his human heart, and his human heart will restart. Like, his heart brings him back from the dead, and then he goes and gives it up. It doesn't.
I know it doesn't make sense. Like his approach to life and death and all of that. It's very, very weird.
Yeah, and I think they were trying to go for the idea that he was, like, living on borrowed time anyway, but it doesn't translate. And it would have made way more sense if the moral of the story is that you can have machine parts and still be human, then just give John Connor a machine heart. Give him some nanotech med kit situation that's known for patching up some very equivalent piece of a Terminator, but it has some sort of machine learning in it, not Skynet, but some sort of intelligent algorithm that can create a functional organ for him to pump his blood with, and then you're fine. But no, we have to make it dramatic and kill Marcus so that there's this huge sacrificial element when he already died for John earlier, and then because of his heart, he was brought back, and now he's just gonna give it up again. It's flipping back and forth. It's saying inconsistent. It's saying you didn't really know how you wanted to end your story, and you just kind of rushed the ending. So it's, in my opinion, easily the worst part of the film. I watched the whole thing. I was like, I'm kind of convinced that this is actually kind of a interesting, good film. And then I got to that last bit, and I went, Why would you?
Why? Yeah, I wasn't crazy about that. That was weird, and it is interesting because everyone is definitely like, you know what? Yeah, because he's quote unquote a Terminator,
Yeah,
but he has the human brain and he has the human heart. And if any other fucker had walked into that tent and been like, "I'll give him mine for the resistance," like, no, Jimmy, go sit down. We're not doing that because we don't trade lives, Vision. Like,
yes. Yeah, no, that's exactly the problem because the whole film argues and establishes that Marcus is a person. He is human.
But not in
and
the
then
end,
they
he's a
treat
robot.
him like a thing that can break apart for
Yeah,
parts. Like
you could just Iron Giant. It's
Hmm.
just a big old dumb machine, big old silly
So,
robot.
two optional alternate endings. John Connor gets the machine heart, or Marcus is gonna die anyway, so he donates his heart. Which honestly, I like the second one probably a little bit better, even though it is more cliche. You know, like let's just.
I feel like there's not a good way to kill Marcus though, and still have the heart be viable, unless he sacrifices himself in a situation where it's necessary. Like,
I would say there's some sort of irreparable damage to the part of him that was linked to Skynet, and he's slowly losing power or something for his robotic parts. And because they're so closely ingrained in all the biological parts, it's basically going to be like a living death. And so he's just like, just take my heart. It'll be an act of mercy for me, and it'll save John Connor's life.
Yeah. I'm still going for the full trilogy pitch, and I'm saying this movie opens with John finding him, waking him up. They have their adventure. I don't know what the adventure is yet. We can write that later. But the end of that movie, the climax or the third act twist is finding out that he's a Terminator, and he didn't know it. And John has to cope with that and realize that his brother in arms has been a monster the whole time. The next movie, which is all about trying to find Kyle and save Kyle, is when John is injured, and we're like, oh my god, are they going a different direction with the story? What are they going to do? And then it's Marcus then sacrifices his heart or whatever. And then in the next movie, with the end sending Kyle back or whatever, but we could also imply very loosely that Marcus is the Terminator that's sent back in the third one. And they like during the events of the third movie, like he loses more and more of his fleshy bits, and then they kind of like maybe he falls apart, maybe he quote unquote dies, and then in this new timeline, because it's already changed, because 3 changes it every time they go back in time, they change it. It's implied that that's the Terminator that they like rebrand as Arnold, and they send him back because he had involvement with John. I don't know, stupid shit, weird things, but like I have a whole trilogy in mind, man, and I think you could flesh it out, and it'd be great. It'd be super cool. It'd be fun. Not whatever the fuck this was.
Yeah, no, it was the end was such a bad choice. I think most of what this film was pretty all right. It's just I don't know. I don't think they were planning for any sequels, and maybe that's the problem. Maybe if they had planned a longer story.
Weird to think about that they weren't. Like, I mean, I guess you don't have to think of it like that. There's like 10 years between each Terminator movie. Fine. But when we get to this next one, I am going to be curious as to why we're going back somehow instead of continuing this interesting world that we're in. You know, like I feel like this is.
I think the tone change and the sort of almost genre change would have shaken audiences. People who like the Terminator movies were going for the fact that they were essentially the same movie with variations, right? There's like I kind of said in the beginning, there's a futuristic robot comes back to kill somebody, John Connor ideally, and you have to deal with that, right? That's the sort of situation of the other ones. This one is a whole new situation. It's still John Connor and Terminators, but now it's like the actual war, and so it feels quite different. What I would say then is if you're not to be like fan elitist, but if you actually enjoy the Terminator films, not just for the visual spectacle, but also for the story they're telling, this one fits in perfectly fine with the franchise.
Yeah.
But if you like the Terminator movies because you like the visual flash and like, you know, vibe of those movies, then you're not going to be satisfied with this movie. And I would not be surprised if most of the audience went to go see a Terminator movie and got a completely different experience than what they thought they were going to get, and they didn't like that, and that's why they moved back to the past in the next one.
I mean, maybe. See, I feel like if I were to not be such a hater, I got lots of Terminator visuals in this movie. Lots of the red eyes and the metal jaws, and it's still weird to think that they designed them that way because there's no reason to do so. But like, it was cool seeing them all. And honestly, it was exciting to see the Arnold one. A little pointless, but it was. I had fun with it. I like the way they blast the theme when he walks out of that room. The ba 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 ba. Like, it was cool. I had fun with that. So I don't know. I'm confused now as well because the next one is like in 2018-ish. But this movie took place in 2018.
In 2018, which was early actually, because Kyle said that he was a part of the army in like 21 through 27, I think.
Yeah, but he's a kid right now, so he's gonna grow up during the war and fighting and all that.
He was basically drafted at the end. Okay.
Fair enough. I'm wondering, like, it just means there's gonna be more time travel mumbo jumbo bullshit that we're not actually gonna watch happen in order for it to take place in the quote unquote when the movie came out modern day, pushing Judgment Day back again, which is all good and fine. But I'm just wondering, like, you can't have someone send back a Terminator to 2018 because
if they were already in the middle of the war in 2000,
right? Like,
yeah.
So I'm a little. I've never looked into it. We've mentioned this in some of the other episodes. I have not Googled or YouTubed how these movies connect or what is what, because I don't want spoilers. But now the more I think about it, watching this one again and knowing what the next two kind of have in store, I'm wondering if we're going to get some X-Men bullshit, which is these next ones actually take place in a different universe. They're like similar, but they're not the same. It's not the same continuity.
I'm expecting exposition at the beginning of the next film, some sort of narration that tells us why we're in the situation we're in. And I would not be surprised if it's something like that. Or maybe we get something like John sent somebody back, and because he delayed Judgment Day again. And so now the movie that we've seen with, you know, Salvation is actually a part of a defunct timeline, but it was still a part of the causality of the next film. Or they could just straight up go, this is another way that a Terminator film could happen, you know? So
yeah, I am the Watcher. I am your guide through these Terminator timelines.
What if?
What if Kyle Reese was a girl? So John doesn't end up existing. And that's the timeline where Sarah's still alive because she had to become the resistance fighter.
Or, okay, you could gender swap them both, and Sarah dies, and now Kyle has to live in like a functional world, but like doesn't know how to pay her taxes.
So I mean, so we are now officially at the point where I've not seen the next two at all. I had seen bits and pieces or these movies once up until this point. I had forgotten a lot of this one, so it was still crazy to see him give up his heart. I don't
I've ever
know.
seen this one.
Yeah, but I am excited for next week just because I want to know either how big of a dumpster fire this becomes, or how cool it'll be to see their take on Terminator multiverse or something like that. I don't know.
Yeah, no, I'm on the same page. I definitely have watched the previous, like the first three. I didn't remember having watched the third one, but it definitely, like, especially near the end, I was like, I have seen this. Salvation I definitely had not seen before. I don't think I'd seen any part of it before, so it's kind of an experience. And I don't think I've watched any part of the next two.
I just remember the trailers for them when they came out.
Are there two?
It's Genesis and Dark Fate.
Okay, so I've not seen Genesis, the next one, but I have seen Dark Fate, and I remember thinking that it was pretty good, and that's kind of when I went back and watched the original Terminator, because like my dad had shown it to me when I was younger, but I hadn't really like connected with it. And for whatever reason, I did watch the most recent one when it came out, and then I went, that was kind of good. Let me
Interesting.
watch the
Okay.
others. But I haven't seen it since then, so I have no idea if it was just me being pleasantly surprised or if it was actually a good film.
In time.
We'll see.
In time. 2 more weeks.
Mhm. Mhm.
But yeah, I mean, that's kind of where we're at in general. It's a little earlier than some of our other episodes, but I mean, I don't really have anything else to say. Tis not a whale. I wouldn't even say
Mm,
it's a dead whale or like some of the
it's
jokes we
like
made. It's
a
just not a.
dolphin.
It's maybe a dolphin, like a SeaWorld dolphin. It's malnourished and it does a couple of cool tricks, but tis not a whale.
I don't know. I have a hard time saying that it's a bad movie, but it definitely has bad parts. So,
I think it's a bad movie that has good parts. It has cool things in it, cool concepts that were not allowed to stand on their own, and they keep tripping themselves. Like it's an amazing athlete tripping over his own feet. He just won't. Like, weird metaphor that I'm losing control of. I think there's interesting stuff here that I would have loved to have seen explored, but you couldn't dedicate yourself to one, or you tried to put too much into this one, and so it's not a whale
yeah.
for me at the very least.
Yeah, I wouldn't call it a whale, but that's not me being like, definitely not a whale. It's just more like, yeah, it missed the mark.
Yeah, it might be one that like it changes for me over time. Like I might give it more slack the next time I watch it. I might find I enjoy it more. All of Marcus's stuff though, I'm gonna find frustrating because Skynet's big reveal, it's just so weird that they had like he was their in guy, but he also clearly wasn't. And there's like your whole goal was to find Kyle Reese, and you did it. How? You were just wandering around L.A. He found you. You didn't do shit. What are you talking about? I don't know. All that, because like, there's no way to fix that. I don't think. There's no way to like argue. I love filling in like stupid little plot holes in superhero movies and Star Wars movies, but like, there's no reason for him to be activated then. There's no reason for him to just wander around aimlessly to find Kyle. Like, if they knew where he was, then send the other Terminators. There's no reason to use him. And then like, his whole goal throughout this movie is to get back to Kyle. For some reason, maybe it's because that's his whole goal is to find Kyle. But he's after Kyle after the Skynet guys have already caught him. So it's not like they even need him anymore. I don't know. He bothers me. The John stuff though might shine more if I watch it and give it more slack.
It was definitely more subtle, the John stuff, because it was largely about just him being a general in the war, and so they don't spend a lot of time with him doing the stuff that Marcus does in the film, but he does have a bit of a character arc that I found interesting.
Yeah, but he's crazy hopping out of moving planes, hoping a submarine will come pick him up. What if they said no?
He's John Connor.
They don't. These guys don't care that it's John Connor. Anyway, that's where we're at. It's not a whale. Thanks for listening. Come back next week.
Bye, guys.
We'll be back. Woohoo.